Welcome to episode 182 of A Pint with Shawnee B. Coming to you from the middle of March. Today happens to be both National Mourning Day in Ireland and World Global Happiness Day. Go figure. It is more of a mourning day to me. Myself and the Don's here with me. Hello, the Don.
Hello.
We've just returned from Mass. Today marks the first year since my father kicked the bucket last year on the 20th of March, and we had a celebratory mass for him today in my local church in Cabinteely in Dublin, and we were up very early for us on a Sunday morning to go and do mass. And I was also, Don, at a confirmation.
I was only thinking that because I was sitting there going, Jesus, whose idea was it to put on mass? A 10 o'clock mass. I didn't think at age 32 here I didn't bother enrolling the kids in any of that shit. And here I am getting 10 o'clock mass. And then I realised, Jesus, you're a fierce religious lately because you were at a mass. I couldn't make it.
A week ago. So
yeah, your niece's one. I wasn't around. I couldn't make it, but you had to go to that. So that's 2 masses in a week or so.
Those of you that are religious, of course, know what confirmation is. Those of you that aren't religious or perhaps of a different faith, well done you, especially the ones who have no religion. But confirmation is one of the third kind of brainwashing sacraments of being a Christian Catholic. You have baptism, which is when you're born, the stain of original sin, which you carry into the world as a small child, full of evil and nastiness. That's washed away when a priest sticks your head underwater and blesses you. Then when you're about 6 or 7 or 8 now and really nasty, you're at the really nasty stage where you're killing people and breaking the 10 Commandments. The Catholic faith has confession, where as a small child you get to walk into a mature man wearing a dress and tell him all your sins face to face, and he kind of basically gives you sort of penance to do, and you must go out and feverishly pray and apologise for all your horrible sins that you committed as a 7-year-old. And then a few weeks after that, because that's called confession, that's to prepare you for communion, which is the next stage of the brainwashing, which is when you're about 7 or 8 and you actually are allowed to eat the body of Christ, which of course in Catholicism transfigures during the Holy Mass, which we went to today. So for the millionth time or 10
watching a bit of cannibalism
time,
going on.
Some bread. And by the way, this is not like a metaphor. It's not like, oh no, it's a metaphor. He broke the bread and the wine. It's a metaphor for it. No, it's his real blood and real body.
Well, I've had this out quite a few times, and my daughter had as well, because she was the only heathen not making her communion at the time, and she was like, it's fucking weird. You think I'm weird for not, but that's fucking weird. You do your thing, I'll do mine. Because somebody was being snarky with her. She'd mind her own business other than that, but when they were kind of telling her she was being fucking weird, she's like, well, I'm not the one who thinks I'm eating. Like, no, it's meant to represent that. And she goes, no.
Yeah.
Do you know what transubstantiation means? That's the difference between being Catholic and Protestant.
Yeah.
You are literally eating it.
So basically the body of Christ is what you actually eat when you stick the wafer in your gob. And if you're allowed, some masses, they let you have a slug of wine. That's not actually wine. That's the blood of Christ, even though it tastes a bit like wine. So anyway.
But you know the way they have the celiac friendly,
yeah,
the gluten-free. But now, I'm kind of going, how do they hold their heads?
Gluten-free hosts.
Hang on, but if the Catholicism thing isn't all bollocks, and if transubstantiation is in fact real, well then we're not eating bread, are we? We're eating meat, so why does it have to be gluten-free? Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I think I don't know where the vegetarians and vegans stand on cannibalism, though. That hasn't been really explained to me much. So it could be okay to eat humans, but not animals. Wouldn't surprise me. And then finally, when you hit about 12 and you're just at that stage where you might be about to shackle free of the shackles that your parents have inculcated into you and brainwashed you through your attendance at church over and over again ad nauseum and all these sacraments, you get the final sacrament. Well, not the final one, because there's also marriage and the afterlife one as a child, which is confirmation, where the Holy Spirit comes on you basically.
Come Holy Spirit,
come Holy Spirit, fill me up. It's all very dodgy.
Yeah,
full of double entendres. But
all of the songs actually are specifically for confirmation.
My niece was having her confirmation, and so apology if you're listening to this and don't like the fact that I'm taking the piss out of your lovely day. But again, all of these are sort of also shakedowns for uncles like me, where you have to, it must remind me to bring 50 quid for today. The kids go around and they wear little dresses and whatever, and they get money from uncles and friends, etc. But what was interesting about the whole, that's just a little bit of background for any of you Muslims listening in who aren't quite, or Church of England, who aren't quite up to speed on all things Cathol. So we were at Mass today, this morning at 10 o'clock, and what did we hear?
Well, they opened with a lovely reading from the book of Exodus. So that was just what you want. Real warm and fuzzy shit. Now, I will say Father Aquinas said a lovely Mass. He gives good Mass.
So the first reading today was from the book of Exodus, as Don said, and it was basically the burning bush story, okay? So this is basically 2022, and everyone who's educated, understands science, understands, I think deep down in many cases, that a lot of this is horseshit. So the burning bush is Moses goes up a mountain, wanders around a corner, and there, lo and behold, in front of him is a bush that's on fire. And the Lord God himself speaks to Moses through the bush, telling him...
I zoned out at that stage, to be honest with you.
Telling him that he has to lead his people out of Egypt to the land of milk and honey. And the bush also says, don't come too close, Moses, don't come too close, because obviously you might get burned, I suppose. And Moses tootled down and said, right, the Lord spoke to me. How did he speak to you? He spoke to me through a burning bush. The bush went on fire, it didn't really burn, and it talked. So a talking burning bush, we're okay with that. And with that, he said, okay, all you Israelis, let's get there was no Israel then, all you Jews, whatever.
Chosen people.
We're going to leave the Egyptians to it, and we're going to cross over and get over to the Promised Land, which is still to this day a precept for argument in favour of
what
Israel.
bothered me, right?
Apartheid regime.
I'm glad you went
there. We don't
there.
like the Muslims
I'm
either,
glad you went there, because there was an awful lot of shouting on about Ukraine from the pulpit today. Yet this is the reading we're getting. Like, I mean, if I were Palestinian, I might go, sorry.
Yeah, so we'll come to the World War III.
But we don't like it when Putin does that.
Yeah, we'll come to World War III later. So that was the first reading. Second reading?
Honestly, I don't know. It was something about, was the gospel, there was something about repenting, it's all your own fault, yada, yada,
No,
yada.
the gospel, this one, was about a fig tree that didn't produce figs in a vineyard.
Yeah.
And, someone went and said, look, this is a fucking shit fig tree. And the guy who runs the vineyard goes, well, it might not be. He says, no, this fig tree hasn't grown a fig in 6 years. Let's cut it down. And the guy went, and this is a parable, I think, told by Jesus. And then the guy around the vineyard said, well, look, give it one last shot, and I'll dig around it. And he actually used these words, I'll dig around it and put some manure in it. And if it doesn't produce figs next year, they'll be grand. So we have this Stone Age parable about a fig tree in a vineyard in ancient times, which is, of course, meant to, just in case you hadn't picked up on it, meant to signify the fact that if you aren't that productive in life and don't really do anything, God still loves you and still might shit on you and give you some manure, and you might, who knows, become tomorrow's sliced bread. And so the whole problem, the reason we're dwelling on this is we were coming back in the car, and it's just so rare for us to go to Mass, especially twice in 2 weeks, and just to see it at this distance.
See, I wasn't listening because I was more taking in the experience, because I used to obviously go to Mass all the time. So it's a rare occasion when I go to Mass, usually because it's someone's funeral or something. But let's take a step back for a second and realise how fucking weird this is. It's like proper Moonies shit. Everybody's like, if you just landed there and you'd never been at church before, seeing all these old people like chanting away weird fucking words, it's odd. And you're standing back going, lads, come on now.
And so, it's just, the reason to bring it up is just because you don't actually notice it. Like, a lot of my friends still go to Mass and they still go, oh, who have you? You've no right to question my faith and question my belief in God and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of go, yeah, I kind of do, because you're an educated person, and at no point have you bothered your whole to try and examine whether any of this gospel stuff is true. Any of it is actually in any way related to what actually went on 2,000 years ago and 4,000 years ago, if you want to believe the Old Testament, or 5,000 or whenever we decide God created the earth. And it's all horseshit. But like, people, I get the fact that there's a salve to modern living where we can go and pretend there's a God. And going in to say, if you want to go into work Mass and pretend there's a God, it probably doesn't have the same effect as if you go in and say, no, I actually really believe this, So I get that. I mean, but it was just, at the confirmation, all these girls are walking around the church going, Hallelujah, Mary, whatever, and then all clapping their hands at the same time. And it was like the Moonies. It was like a sect. But it's our sect. And there's nothing wrong with our sect. And the Muslims are the problem. And the Jews are the problem. And the Hindus are the problem. But the Christians are the fundamentalist Christians who are the real believers. They're the ones out of the front line killing the abortionists and all that kind of stuff.
It's just
the world
so
just needs to wake
strange.
up, doesn't it? Anyway, so that's a bit of an apology, with apologies to my father, who'd be turning in his bloody grave listening to this. So
And fairness, you said it to his face.
So look, he didn't know my father believed in the Pascal's wager, which is priceless as well. Especially as my father was a very educated man as himself.
Yeah.
You know what that is?
Yeah, that's like, either way. If I'm wrong, fuck it. If I'm right, I'll be glad I went along with it.
Yeah, so Dad used to say that, well, if I die and there is no God, well, what have I lost? And if I die and there is a God, well, I'll have been an obedient servant in his servitude and slavery for it.
Yeah, but that kind of...
Do you reckon God knows that you've actually been hoodwinking him?
Yeah, that whole kind of thing goes with the Gay Byrne thing. Do you remember Gay Byrne used to do the meaning of life? But remember he had Stephen Fry on, and Stephen's Fry.
It's probably worth reading it. You have it there. You should read it.
Yeah, so I think it was 2015, and Gay Byrne was interviewing Stephen Fry, and so he always asks the question of, if you're outside the pearly gates, what would you say? If it's all true, all that kind of thing. So in Stephen Fry's imaginary conversation with God, he went on a rant. He said he would tell him, how dare you create a world in which there's so much misery that is not our fault. It's not right. It's utterly, utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain? Pressed by Byrne over how he would react if he was locked outside the pearly gates, Fry says, I would say, bone cancer in children? What's that about? Because the God who created this universe, if it was created by a God, is quite clearly a maniac, utter maniac, totally selfish. We have to spend our life on our knees thanking him. What kind of God would do that? Yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why? Why did you do that to us? You could have easily made a creation in which that didn't exist. It is simply not acceptable. It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect whatsoever. The moment you banish him, life becomes simpler, purer, cleaner, more worth living, in my opinion.
That got Stephen Fry into trouble for archaic blasphemy laws.
Yeah.
That are the envy of Pakistan and Bangladesh, but which have since been changed. But he got into a lot of trouble for that. Richard Dawkins had a great letter, which I think we read out in the podcast before. But the point is with people, they go, oh yeah, okay, so what? So yeah, people die and children die and whatever, but it's about faith. Yeah. You kind of go, no, it's not about fucking faith. It's not about that at all. It's about proof it's no different to Santa Claus. This.
But I remember constantly having these arguments as a child because it was so forced down my throat. And I was a very well-behaved child, but I took it very seriously. It really mattered to me to be a good person. So when I was very small, I was incredibly pious, but then I was having these religious problems and it would come up in conversation. My dad was pushing religion and that's just the way it is. And well, I don't think the same as, and sometimes I have an issue with the church, but religion is important, faith's important, but I would be not trolling him. I used to be quite troubled at 3, 4, 5, but with I have to be getting this wrong. And probably because I was an autistic child as well. It's very things are black and white and what's right and what's wrong. And I remember constantly asking the awkward questions. I kind of going, so, but if the point, but if I were born somewhere else and I wasn't raised Catholic, I wouldn't know any better. So you're telling me that God's not going to let me into heaven for that? So why do I deserve to get into heaven, but some girl the other side of the world doesn't? And she's more likely to die sooner because I happen to be lucky to be born in Ireland. And he's like, oh, well, it won't work for that. And I was like, well, what's the point of baptism then? And I was like, well, no, hang on. But you said that we have to do it because this. So what's the point then? And then I was kind of going, okay, but even if I was raised Catholic and I am totally wrong and I die and God's there and I go, oh my God, I'm really sorry. I should have said my prayers. I'm sorry about that. But if he knows that I just genuinely thought it was bullshit, but I worked really hard to be a nice person and I gave to charity and I was always kind and I didn't steal and I didn't cheat people, is he really going to not forgive me if I'm 80 and I get to heaven and he's like, well, sorry, you didn't go to mass. I'm going, my mistake, mea culpa, but I did live a good life. But somebody else who went to mass and was an asshole and cheated people and hurt people, they're getting in. And I just couldn't grasp this. And he's like, no, you're not getting it. And I was like, well, what am I not getting? And it would always end, we'd go round and round and it would always end in, you're just not old enough to understand.
It's patronising.
And I'm like, but you can't explain it to me.
It's patronising hypocrisy, and it's also brainwashing of children at a time when we have science. I can understand the juju when we're in the Stone Age and wearing sandals and long frocks and beards, and we don't wash, and we have disease killing us left, right and centre, and plagues and pestilence. Okay, we can believe in gods. You know, people in ancient Rome believed in gods because they thought thunder and lightning was whatever in the sky, but we're fucking grown up now. And this idea that we inculcate our children into this in such a sinister, actually, it's a sinister way. But
like, it's horrible because, look, we all know it's bullshit, right? But you're sitting there listening to it going, this isn't nice. These aren't nice stories. Like, if Disney came out with a new Pixar movie and that was the story, you'd be a bit like, really, for the kids? I don't know. It's horrible. We're not allowed to say boo to them anymore. Like, I'm constantly a bad mother because I don't treat my children like they're fucking toddlers and I speak to them like they're people. But I'm not there teaching them about crucifixion. But like, when I tell them the truth about other difficult things in life that everyone else, oh no, let's wrap them up in cotton wool, we couldn't possibly tell them anything uncomfortable, and you know, it's my job to tell them the truth but make it okay because I'm their mammy, and like, you know, I'm not saying I terrorise them, but like, I'm not the one who's telling them they're going to hell. I'm not the one who's fucking teaching them about crucifixion. And a lot of even if you look at the parables, I kind of look at them and I go, I find them quite flawed. They don't really go with it's not a nice story. Even the nice bits, even the like touchy-feely, huggy, isn't Jesus lovely bits, I kind of go, actually not a great character.
But at some point they end up, you know, they tell the kids, oh yeah, Santa Claus doesn't exist and the Easter Bunny doesn't exist. But this does exist. This is actually true. And, you know, it's just, I just find it, we are, I mean, the COVID thing as well, we're so stupid. I mean, we really are so stupid that we can all sit there chanting. And like, people will give out to me for this. They go, oh, you're so disrespectful to my religion and to our faith and to our belief in God. But those people have never really studied. I mean, I went and did a bit of a deep dive on Gospels and Marian apparitions and all this kind of stuff. And I've studied it. And it's a kind of nonsense.
On that note, it's interesting you said that because here's the thing. I don't believe in going around disrespecting other people. If they have a faith, that's their fucking business, right? I don't feel the need to shove it down their throat. I'm not going to give them shit. I'm not going to go into the church and behave badly. You know, stand, you know, be respectful. I don't actually have to respect their faith. I have no respect for it. I think it's ridiculous. And that, to me, I've been struggling with this, aside from the religion thing, although it's quite close to the religion thing, in terms of modern politics and leftist politics. Things that I have an issue with is identity politics. And I'm kind of going, at what point did we decide that anybody is entitled to have their identity validated by me? I'm not going to go around invalidating someone's identity for the sake of manners. But just to be quite, I don't have to view you as you view yourself, whether it be that you're dividing yourself by race or by gender, or all that. But there's all of this oppression Olympics and identity politics. And I find it really interesting because what the fuck are we doing? First of all, you're not entitled to have people validate your identity and agree with you. You're entitled to have people not shit all over you and give you a hard time. But I don't have to see, it's none of your business how I perceive you. I don't have to respect your faith. I ought to be respectful of you and not be rude to you, but I don't actually have to respect your faith. I think it's bullshit. And if we're going to have a discussion about it, I'm allowed to say that it's bullshit, not only because it impacts me, but I don't actually have to respect it. I can think it's ridiculous. Just like I can think any other aspect of your identity is ridiculous, so long as I'm not following you around giving you a shit time in your life. I'm leaving you alone. But I don't have to respect it. Where do we get this notion that I have to fucking respect it?
Yeah, we have this thing where I know we've bagged on religion an awful lot on this podcast, but years are going by and sliding by and the climate change and everything. And there's just this kind of, oh, God will work everything out for us and God is kind and God is good and God is loving and God is merciful. I mean, like, you know, it's you're almost like a conspiracy theorist for questioning religion. You know, it's like the religious people, oh, look at all the conspiracy, Sean Boyle and saying that God doesn't exist and that you know, it's all a conspiracy and but yeah.
Oh, you know what people are really thinking, Sean? Let's be honest. What they're really thinking is, of course it's bullshit, but can you shut up because you're making it uncomfortable because we've been using religion to access privilege that we don't want to have to pay for. And what I mean by that is the education system in Ireland is still choked by religion, which means that my children have to have indoctrination going on around them. But also, to be quite fucking honest, a really big reason why a lot of people still put their kids through the sacraments is because they want to go to a posh school. And the reason they want to go to a posh school is that at the end of the education cycle, when we decide whose kids are going to go on and get to do a degree and whose kids are going to be serving chips, they're in a competition, a blind competition with my children. So they want a head start. And part of that head start is most of these posh schools are deeply religious. So we're going to make sure that we get the communion and the confirmation because I want to make sure I can get my kid into a school that will guarantee that they beat your child.
Yeah,
so that's why. Very Christian of them.
My family has tuts me when they hear this sort of shit. But they're so... I mean, the whole point is, you know, they spend a lot of the... I think it's the New Testament... or maybe it's the Old Testament, giving out about hypocrites. Like there were actually people called hypocrites. Yeah. Like the Phoenicians and the Galileans who we had today, they were slaughtered somewhere at Mass today as well. But the hypocrisy of the church knows no bound. I mean, we have a good time to segue into World War III. So since we were last with you, World War III broke out, as you all know, and I think we were just sitting there going, what the fuck do we have to say about this? So we're a bit late back to the podcast with... Yeah. We were going to do a Paddys Day, which was 2 days ago, but that didn't feel right. And it's just been sitting there. I've been just like dumbfounded, staring at the way this could even happen.
I mean, yeah. And I'm also kind of, like, I was kind of glued to it the first few days and like most people kind of just moving off it now. And part of that is, it just feels really hypocritical. And whenever you say this, you get accused of whataboutery. And I'm like, no, I can hold two beliefs at once. I can feel really sorry for the people of Ukraine. I can my heart can go out to them, whilst also recognizing it is absolutely like, I'm delighted that we're welcoming Ukrainians into Ireland and we're making sure that they can work and they've got certain rights while they're here. And hopefully they won't be here too long because they can go home. But like, we're treating them well and I'm delighted and I do not begrudge them that. I don't wish they were treated as badly as the other people that we've welcomed in. But we now have a two-tier system. We have direct provision for brown people and for white European people. Ukraine isn't in the EU, but they're allowed to work. They're allowed to access social welfare, dignity while they're here. But what about the Syrians?
Yeah.
Like it's disgusting. And I'm like, is nobody else mortified? It's not that I begrudge the Ukrainians that, but at this I can't grasp it. It's like if one of my kids had a birthday party, right? And there's kids from all different backgrounds in their school. And imagine if my kid had a birthday party and I always do like really cool party bags at the end, but there's like a bucket of shit ones and there's a bucket of good ones. And I go, oh, hang on, that's the black child. All the black kids get the shit one. Would you not be mortified? That's what we're doing. So it's not that I don't care what's happening in Ukraine, but I'm just sickened by how a lot of people... And as soon as you say this, it's whataboutery. It's not. It's like, have you no fucking shame? You don't give a shit until they're white and it's on your doorstep.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And I also want to say this. And first of all, I want to say that I abhor what's going on in Ukraine. I think Putin is an arsehole. And I always thought he was more intelligent than this, because this is showing the signs of stupidity, what he's doing. Because he hasn't a chance of taking over Ukraine. Hasn't a chance. We're good examples of that in this country, especially up in the north. But the most racist people in Europe are Ukrainian, Polish, Hungarian, Russian, Belarusian. And I know I'm generalizing here, but behind that iron curtain is the most anti-black, anti-Islam, anti-anything that you're likely to find anywhere in the Western world. And I know this, I remember even working back in the day on Gillette. I may have brought this up in the podcast before.
Yeah.
And I'd have these phone calls with 20 people from Eastern Europe, like Moscow's dialing in, Budapest is dialing in, Greece weirdly used to be on the same call. And we in Gillette, they used to hire people like Tiger Woods, Thierry Henry, and all these other sports stars. And I'd be in charge of strategy. And the lead guy in P&G management in Moscow would go, please make sure you don't use any black people in the advertising because black people don't work here. When the Brit, and that's a true story, and you're sitting there on the other end of the phone going, what the fuck do I say to this? And then someone will say, well, is it P&G's role to actually break barriers down and race? Or are these guys just trying to sell more razor blades? And should they then be right in saying that you can't use black people in ads for Russia? And so Thierry Henry couldn't work in Russia. Tiger Woods couldn't work in Russia, to which I call bullshit. And to be fair, there are plenty of people I know in Hungary and some of these countries who are grand, right? They're not racist. And love Thierry Henry and probably love Tiger Woods. But your country stinks to high heaven. All of these countries. Hungarians, when the British and Irish went, wouldn't take the knee, are hurling abuse at England's players, black players, and our black players. And so here you are, you're now the refugees, you're now the blacks of Europe, and you expect to be given pretty good treatment. And you are given it, which is also deeply disturbing.
Well, on that front, as you're saying it, I'm uncomfortable because I agree with you. And I'm conscious, tomorrow there's going to be a handful of Ukrainian kids coming into my daughter's class because she's in the smallest class in the school. So they were told on Monday they have a few, and maybe his class as well. And you're just thinking these are kids and they're coming from an awful. But I'm sitting back waiting to see, because I know it's going to happen. There have been 3 incidents in the past couple of months that have been brought to my attention by both my children where something overtly racist happened. Now, I'm sure there is other racism going on that's just going over their heads, but 3 incidents where it was quite overtly racism. And I'm not being funny, but on each occasion it was 3 different people who made racist comments or who picked on somebody of colour. And all 3 of those people were the children of Eastern Europeans. Haven't ever heard it. I'm sure it's Irish kids as well, but that's the reality. That's there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, you can just look to football, and I know football, and I also know what I've experienced when I've been there. And Russia is extremely racist against black people. I mean, even when black people were trying to get out of the colleges in Ukraine, in the early part of the war, they were having difficulty.
You don't belong
again,
there.
I'm not saying we shouldn't be housing Ukrainians. I'm not saying we're not doing a great job. I'm also intrigued to see how the amount of houses in Dublin, particularly in the more affluent areas, which have got 7 and 8 bedrooms and a couple of old folks rattling around in it, are going to put their shoulder to the wheel to house Ukrainian families in their granny flats and their outside dormer bungalows that they have on Airbnb.
I noted with interest that Father Aquinas this morning mentioned, was it 2 families that are taking in?
Yeah.
And I thought, that's dreadful. You mean in the entire parish? A parish that unusually has massive fuck-off houses? Only 2?
Well, let's just be clear. It was the 2 that the church knows about. So there were also about 20 people at Sunday Mass at 10 o'clock. When I was growing up, those masses were clogged from 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 4:30 in the afternoon. Full up. So.
Well, I remember saying to you earlier on this morning, what I'm dying to see is, I want to know if any of the private schools are going to offer a place to Ukrainian children. Because the private schools are all fucking religious orders, and if they're not going to bring them in, obviously they're not going to be in a position to pay for tuition. But if there's no Ukrainian kids in but if they do bring a few of them in, well then the class numbers go up, and they're making money off small class sizes. But it is absolutely outrageous if they have the neck to not offer places to some Ukrainian kids.
Yeah,
obviously free of charge.
But
in fee-paying schools, that just fucking reeks. That just says it all.
The point we're making is, everywhere you look, there's a stink of hypocrisy about whatever. I mean, Islamic refugees have been piling into Europe for the last decade, many out of Syria, many out of Iraq, many out of Afghanistan. And we're kind of like, yeah, we'll house you in sort of substandard conditions, and it's going to take years, and we're going to maybe accuse you of being a terrorist that we're importing. And most of them are women and children too. But,
do you know what what pisses me off as well is, I'm kind of sick of seeing everybody, particularly on Facebook, certain people that I'm sitting there going, you got the Ukrainian flag, you're sharing a fucking poem every 2 minutes about how awful it is. Yeah, about how awful it is. But did you not just go into Avoca and buy stuff in Avoca? Avoca being the nice posh people shop where, it's owned by Arranmore, who run the direct provision centres.
Yeah, well, no one knows that. So.
They do. They do. They won't give that up, though. Piss off.
So the problem is and by the way, we can equally go heavy hobnail boots as we have done before on Islam and Muhammad and all that, and you can come and kill us if you want. The point is, we have to move on from religion. We have to move on to something. I don't know what it is. I'm not the fucking messiah who's going to change that. We do need to have a set of rules to live by, and Catholicism claiming they came up with them is utterly egregious, because they've been around since we first started huddling in caves together. And so we need to come up with something that's more modern. We need to come up with something that's more humane, and something that doesn't see colour, and something that is fair. And, it's not communism or maybe hardcore socialism. It's certainly not capitalism, even newism as well. And the longer we kind of keep tiptoeing around and hemming and apologising for who we've said boo to. I mean, here's a great piece. I found this piece, and you've been looking for. Remember, we went to see Doug Stanhope in London, and he did this crazy bit about the Indians.
Oh.
Okay, so there's a massive fucking trigger warning here, everybody. Okay, we're going to play a bit of Doug Stanhope, who's one of our favourite comedians. This is a recording of a show from a couple of years ago. Doug Stanhope is one of our favourite comedians because he speaks a lot of truth to power, and he walks tight ropes of death and usually lands on the right side of them.
He's the most subversive comic I've ever heard. He's deeply intelligent. So, to be honest, I mean, fair enough, people are allowed to disagree with me and think they don't like his stuff, but I would say 80% of people who would be horrified by him are just too stupid to understand.
Yeah.
He's deeply subversive. He always actually comes out on the right side. He's always punching upwards, actually, but he makes his subversive point by saying something outrageous and horrible. Yeah. But a lot of people are not bright enough to grasp that.
This piece is distant from Ukraine racism, and this is distant from our racism that probably people are switching off for. But I lived in India for a bit, and when I was in India, they do have a gang rape problem. If you're an Indian girl going home on a bus late at night, or if you're walking through a dark neighbourhood, there is a problem with men raping women, and not just solo. And this was Doug Stanhope's response, and again, triggering especially if you're Indian. You know what, if you're Indian, listen to this, and let's have the discussion after you've heard it.
Because that's how they do in the India. That's the thing. It's what they have to deal with. Indian men gang rape. It's sad and it's savage, and because Indian men are not strong enough to rape by themselves. It's physiology or sociology. It's fucking science. You get your GED and come debate me, but it's true. Indian men don't have the upper body strength to pin and submit. Did you ever see a Indian dude in the UFC? No, you never will. Unless he's a ring girl. That's why they created their god Vishnu with so many arms to represent what it would take for even their god to be able to take a lady down alone. I don't take this the wrong way. I'm saying Indian men are basically the women of men, in that they, if there were no women, Indian men would be the ones that you'd want to make the love at. Hopefully. On a good day. Yeah, sometimes you're going to get drunk and slum it with a hipster, but you're going to be imagining him as an Indian man underneath you, because Indian men are the most beautiful, polite, accommodating, docile, supple of men. They have that sick, silky, thick black hair, just dense everywhere. Their whole head, their whole one eyebrow, their back, soles of their feet. Legend has it, hair as thick as their head, like a slipper on the bottom of their feet, skating on sunshine. Indian men are the most attractive of men, not to women. Hence the rape problem with their gang raping. But I'm a dreamer. I'm an idealist. I like to believe in a world where everyone lives on a level playing field, where everybody's equal, where an Indian man could at least believe in himself enough and have the courage to at least try to rape solo. He couldn't do it. Like, don't panic. Indian guy tried to rape you all by himself in a dark parking lot. You would just laugh like you're laughing now and put your hand on his forehead like when your 4-year-old nephew tries to swing punches at you and you just hold him out of arm's reach till he tuckers himself out. He gets all tired, and then you laugh and you go back to Easter dinner and everyone has a fine time. But at least that guy had enough self-esteem to make the attempt. A community lifted him up enough to have this self-confidence to try, because nobody ever wants to die thinking, what if? Like, at least he put it out there. And I'll be honest, I don't know if this bit has a point. But if there is a point, it's this. Is it wrong to use racism to try to stop gang rape? And that's a question for you to answer individually. Don't shoot the messenger. I put that on you, and you have to make the decision which is right and which is wrong, and either answer you come up with, you're a fucking asshole. You're either a vulgar racist or you're a gang rape apologist. Either way, you sicken me. Can't believe I performed for you people.
So basically, who are we still to get to? We haven't insulted the Seppos yet, but the week that's in it, we absolutely should. Paddy's Day. We haven't insulted the Seppos yet this time, or the Tans. Oh, I wanted to have a go at the Tans.
No, like, what's your view on that?
I think as Stanhope stuff goes, that one is one of his particularly ones. But I do think, I think it's subversion. It's meant to be.
You mean to support?
Well,
I know my Indian. I've got a lot of friends in India, and I lived and worked there, and I get, like, imagine if that was Irish, right?
Yeah.
And it was about, we did have, a rape issue in Ireland, and we were known as being rape a little bit more rapey than, say, Britain or whatever, and we were known as being drunken rapists. Okay, and some comedian did a bit about us, right? And they do it about us drinking and fighting anyway. Would we be offended?
Okay, so I find it interesting because, yes, it's dreadful, but I remember a particular special interest of mine a year or two ago was looking at how leftist ideology is that, there's an awful lot of, let's not ever criticize Islam. And I don't like racism. I don't like when little girls in my son's class are treated like shit because they're wearing a hijab. Wasn't their fucking choice, was it? So I don't like that. However, I do find that when we discuss issues about child marriage and feminism and girls' issues tend to get glossed over because we don't want to encourage the bigots and the Islamophobes. And I'm kind of going, well, that's deeply racist, because if we were talking about a little blonde girl getting married off at 13, if we were talking about FGM being part of their culture, if they were blonde, we wouldn't stand for it. So it's actually, in an effort to not be a bigot and Islamophobe, we're being deeply racist because we're so unwilling. If you're quite lefty, I found that there was such an unwillingness to criticize, to stay in your own lane, so we won't criticize a different culture, so that we don't look like one of the bad guys, such that we totally abandoned little girls, and that was outrageous. And so when I listened to that piece, which is a particularly bowed piece by Doug. That's what it reminds me of. And the fact that it has that, and I know he's doing it for diddlement, but it actually brings you to that thought experiment sort of. So which is it? Are you a rape apologist or are you filthy, or are you a filthy racist? Yeah. So that's what it reminds me of. Most people aren't going to hear that when they listen to it, but I actually do think it's quite, I agree with them because I think it's quite interesting to bring about those thought experiments. I think that's the kind of crack, and that's the kind of comedy, if you're listening to it, that will make you think twice and go, well, hang on, am I going to be so busy being afraid that I'll be seen as a bigot that I completely abandon little brown girls and don't give a shit about them because I don't want to look racist. We're just going to brush it under the carpet. We're not going to mention anything so that we can appear really woke and nice.
Yeah, well, and as I say, it's comedy. It's someone taking the piss out of Indians, okay? And not all Indians, and I mean, I was thinking about it as well with my Indian friends. They would have been ad guys who I worked with, and most of them would laugh at that, okay, and not get all into high dudgeon or impose a fatwa on them. Put it this way: if it was done to Muslims, he'd have a fatwa on them, right? And he also did something really dodgy in Thailand about the king of Thailand, and he had to run out of Thailand before they lynched him. So there are all these customs and mores and ability to defend your country from people like that. But that's, to me, Chappelle-esque. That's, to me, someone who's actually saying, isn't this all very absurd and stupid and hypocritical? And why can't we see that and see how stupid it is?
But I do genuinely think it's really important to address the fact that, like, his diddlement of kind of saying, either way, you're still a cunt. And I'm like, it's almost like a game of would you rather.
And I'm ashamed of you.
And I'm ashamed of you, which is hilarious. But I think that's really important because I can see in a lot of the issues that I'm interested in, I see people so busy not wanting to be seen as a bigot or the bad guy that they're actually failing in integrity. And you're going, again, there's the hypocrisy. I think it's really important, and comedy is there. I love comedy, but comedy is important. Comedy has always been important. Comedy has a much greater power to turn hearts and minds than preachy shit. It really does. Yeah. It's amazing how you can get people to come around if you can get a laugh out of them. And nobody wants to be that fucking arsehole that everyone's just sneering at. So you can do a lot of good with comedy. And yes. I think it's important to address this thing of when we're so busy tiptoeing because we don't want to look like one thing, are we ignoring something else?
There's a link to that Doug Stanhope show in its entirety in the blurb of the podcast. And it's probably important to watch it in context. Doug Stanhope puts an awful lot of his stuff up on YouTube, and there's also a link to his merchandise page. He's got books and DVDs, and well worth buying some of his stuff. And speaking of comedians, Zelensky is coming out all guns blazing, and you have to look at the Ukrainian people and go how brave they are, and how we talked a bit about it here in Ireland. We've got like 4 helicopters and a rusty battleship that's about to sink as a standing army. So if Britain reinvaded us, or Russia, who were sniffing around our coastline before all this happened, if you remember from the last episode, if they invaded, I was saying, we were having this chat the other day, and I was saying if they came in, we'd have to just let them. Because if you start being bravado and starting to fight them with Molotov cocktails.
They're just pipe bombs. I mean, it's amazing how Sinn Féin, do you want to have your go now? You can have your go. This is probably more your end.
But the history of them is from the Finns. When the Russians were dicking around Finland, Molotov was the actual, not like Filatov, who's our guy, Filatov fish. Molotov was the Russian foreign minister, and they called them Molotov cocktails. But yeah, we'd have to let them in, and then we'd fight. I guess we'd all enlist and we'd fight a guerrilla war.
Would we?
Them. Yeah, I think so. I mean, we might try and fight them to try and look tough, and we'd end up losing 60% of our men, mainly men. Oh, we got a letter actually from the last show about Not All Men, where the Don, if you're going to go back and listen to it, sort of took a hatchet to.
Oh, who did I upset?
Our manhood. No, I thought it was great, and it got an awful lot of traction. Listen to much more than a usual episode. We did get a bit of snotty email from Australia on it when the war broke out. The email goes as follows: what's the Don's thoughts on 18 to 60 men being mandated to stay and fight on the front line in the Ukraine for combat work that women are equally capable of doing? I know Ukraine is probably old world, but I'm not being silly. This is pointy edge stuff here. where shit gets real. That was from a male in Sydney.
Oh, do you think?
Imagine.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, it's not groundbreaking. We've had many of these, and like I could, there are a million TikTok videos of people thinking they're doing a thing by making that point. What I find uncomfortable there is, are we actually using the tragedy of people's lives being destroyed in Ukraine as a look at you talking about not wanting women to get raped and how an awful lot of men are behaving like that? Well, I'll see you that and raise you. We're the ones who have to go to war. Really? Does it bother you that much that I have an issue with the fact that women are frequently sexually assaulted, and I'd rather if men would have a chat with their friends because we do have an issue there.
Especially during war.
We can kind of care about two things at once. Also, wars are always carried out in women's bodies. If you don't think that rape is one of the biggest weapons of war, that's going to be another thing. So I kind of find it tacky, but however, we're here, let's have the conversation. I don't think anyone should have to stay to fight a war. I do think if you're going to have some people stay, it stands to reason that, you know, what mothers and children, particularly if you're breastfeeding, unless you want to pop a tit out and feed the child, there's a reason that the mammies are being let go. I would also question, which might be a very unfeminist take, but here we go, are women generally as capable of combat?
Yeah.
I never
Guns
claimed
are
to
very
be.
heavy.
Guns are very heavy. Now, I will say, women were very useful in the 1916 Rising, and the reason for that is because Cumann na Món had taught a lot of first aid courses and things. So what they all did, why we did so well, considering we had fuck all weaponry and we'd fuck all people, was they always put men and women together, and men held the bulk of the weight of the guns, and the women were much better snipers. But they did so because men were able to help. So I would argue the point of, certainly, I'm not going to be better in combat. I wouldn't pull that out of volleyball.
I would have this is terribly unfeminist, but I would have a combat unit of women like the SAS that would just entrap men because men are so stupid and fall for good.
Well, they have been doing that. The women have been on Tinder.
Okay, I know, yeah, but like that, and then they just, you know, have a hairpin into the back of the neck and they just lie dead. They'd be just a really cool Lucy Liu type bunch of black widows who would just go out and kill. You know?
Yeah, but listen, I don't personally think anyone should be asked to stay and fight if they don't want to, but I'd hazard a guess it was a man that made that decision, not a woman. Well, just like it's always a man who starts the war. However, I am also a mother of a son, and would I send my child to war because some fucking dickheads with money want to have a go with the tanks, but it's never them that are going to fucking fight the war. For nothing. If the Tans invaded tomorrow and wanted to take over Ireland, I'd be like, grand, Union Jack down the side of the house, fucking fine. But if you think I'm sending my fucking son to fight some war, for what country? For the country that's not going to fucking house them? Because I don't see a 32 county socialist republic. I don't even see a 26 county socialist republic. So considering how little of a shit the Irish state seems to give about my son, am I sending him to war?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's suppose the
good for anyone who wants to. Good for them. I respect them. I'm not fucking doing it.
Let's suppose Boris Johnson, because he's well capable of this, decides that, you know, the way to get rid of the problem with Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland Agreement and the EU is simply for us to retake Ireland. We've had it for 800 years, and we're going to move our tanks and troops in tomorrow. As you said, do you know what
I'd say? Is my son going on the NHS?
Yeah, okay.
Because the HSE's done fuck all for him.
What we would have a responsibility as Irish people to our ancestors is to fight against that happening. Now, I would pick up a gun if that happened, but I wouldn't go, let's try and defend them when they're landing. I'd wait and let them not destroy our cities, and I'd get guns in from somewhere and conscript all the men, and we would have Northern Ireland times 10 and bring it on in guerrilla warfare.
I don't have any responsibility to my ancestors.
I know, it's an interesting point, but you have responsibility to Ireland, to defending your nation. You know, that's exactly what the Ukrainians are doing, and they're only recent additions to the world.
I respect what they're doing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not running it down. I think there's a huge amount of bravery, and I respect it. But I'm at the stage now where I'm going, why would I send my son or my daughter? Why would I send him? I'd be like, if we were in that position and he was not supposed to leave the country, I'd fucking smuggle him out. No fucking. There's no pride in it. There's no pride in being dead. And why would I? So he can defend a country that old men are going to run and not share any of the wealth, and he's never going to get on the fucking property ladder. And why? So we can set fire to the planet, which is burning. Like, what's the fucking carbon footprint of missiles? But like older people who are greedy.
You're also permitting the tyrant.
Yeah, but there's an element of me kind of going, why the fuck? What's he fighting for? If I'm sending my son to fight, what's he fighting for?
Well,
for a country that doesn't give a shit.
By Britain again.
Yeah.
And we know how that went for
Well, I do
800
think,
years.
I think there comes a point
Why
where...
did anyone fight with pitchforks or
Well, I
whatever?
think there comes a point where, yeah, you know, beware of people who have nothing left to lose. And there's this, like, I remember when the last general election, like this just bafflement of people kind of your age and older, not you, but a lot of people of your station and age, just kind of constantly talking in such a way, like young people, they don't realise when they're voting for Sinn Féin, like they're too young, they don't have a living memory of the problems. And I'm kind of going, no, you just can't grasp. We don't care if Sinn Féin fuck the country up. What are they going to do? Crash the housing market again? Good, because we're fucking locked out. And it's like people above a certain age and a certain demographic couldn't grasp that younger people and people in a lower socioeconomic station, it's not that they're too stupid to understand what's likely to happen. It's that they have nothing to lose and they're quite okay with fucking up your situation because we're fucked. And it's like there's a certain age group that can't grasp when you take everything away from people. At a certain point, they go fuck it. So I also kind of wonder how many people in their 20s in Ireland would be arsed taking up arms. What, to defend you rich cunts that don't give a fuck about our generation?
You're not defending the rich cunts. You're defending your nation.
Yeah,
you're defending the famine people. You're defending
their
history.
They're dead.
I know they are, but you're not defending rich cunts. In this case, it's not that Ukraine are not defending rich cunts.
No, I know.
Right?
I get
You're defending
that.
Ireland, the country, from invasion by the British again.
Yeah,
right?
but you kind of go.
So
how well is the country doing for you?
Okay, I can understand why you go fuck Ireland, right?
Yeah.
Who gives a fuck about Ireland? It's a shithole anyway, right? And the Brits will probably do a better job when they come in because they did the last time, right? So you can have that argument and go, fuck it, I'm not fighting. I'm not losing my life for this.
Yeah.
Got it. I'll put a Union Jack outside my window if it means they're not going to blow me up. And I think that's exactly what Putin thought was going to happen in the Ukraine, to be honest. I thought they were going to welcome him in with bunting, to say thanks for saving us. And he got that totally fucking wrong. Because actually land, and look at the way Northern Ireland has been, like Northern Ireland looks slightly funny to your point, I think, from this distance. But when I was growing up, it was like fucking shootings and bombings and shit like that. And you just go all day, every fucking day, every week. And there's only 3,000 people killed in 25, 6, 30 years, whatever. And there's been that killed in a day, probably, in this war in Ukraine. But,
yeah, but like we all
it's interesting to think, would you fight? I think I would fight, because I think that they would be transgressing international law. And if we don't try and fight that, then any tyrant can have permission, a bit like what Putin thinks he has, to go back into, I had it before, I'm going to take it. And if we don't stand up as a world and as a nation, like imagine if the world came to our aid and we go, oh no, we're not really fighting, we're kind of just not bothered, right? And they were defending us. It would be a bit embarrassing if the people from the country are saying, no, in you come, America, yeah, thanks. Yeah, you got your young men can die. We're grand, actually. We don't mind the British, they speak our language. So there is an international law thing here that needs to be. I also understand your point.
The thing
I think
is,
it's preposterous that there is.
Watch me sacrifice one of my children that I brought into the world because international law. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, but
I'm not putting my kid in a box because somebody else has pride.
But there's also a entitlement there. Like there's conscription in countries where the society, the nation said, we will commit our sons at 16 or 17 to get 2 or 3 years army experience in case there's a war. And we all agree that. Now, there are Muhammad Ali's and everyone like this. This is ridiculous. Anyone fighting a war is ridiculous. Everyone should put down their guns. Yeah. In fact, if women probably around the world, there'd be an awful lot less nuclear warheads.
There'd be a lot of bitching going on.
A lot of bitching, but less fucking war. So it is
more hard feelings.
I think that's why we've taken so long to do this podcast. And even now, there's so much tension in this podcast, because everywhere you look right now, you're seeing fucking hypocrisy and bullshit. And we couldn't get to this point because you're right. Why should Union or anyone have to go to war, to fight? And like in some cases in Ukraine, they're digging trenches like World War One.
But I mean, like, when you think about it, the reality is people make an awful lot of money out of war.
Yeah.
War is just, it's going to make a shit. Someone's going to get really fucking wealthy on my tears. And I'm sorry, the one thing I hope never ever happens to me is that I have to bury a child. Yeah. Am I fuck doing it to feed some war machine?
I think you need to move away from the economics of it, because the economics of it. $1 in $5 in the US economy or something is based around the military in some shape or form.
Yeah.
whether it's food. We had this conversation the last time about the cost of an actual a warhead is billions. Like we were joking about our army, which is literally is only a few helicopters and a few soldiers. We've got nothing. Finland, who's about our size, has got like fucking MiG fighters and, you know, a navy because they're butting up against Russia. But where do they get the money to also do good schools and do good colleges and not have waiting lists in their hospitals and not have a housing crisis? Where's all the money gone? Where's all our money gone?
Well,
you know, we don't have to buy an army. We don't have to pay or buy a standing army. And that takes upwards of 3-4% of GDP. Because
the fact that, I mean, then it reminds you, and it goes to show, because the money is there, but in a lot of the Nordic countries, there's a view that democratic socialism benefits society, and I could be greedy and hoard everything, or I could live in a society where, generally speaking, everybody's doing a bit better. People have access to healthcare. People are well educated. It's not this constant greedy fucking competition between everybody. Yeah. There's a joint thing of we don't want to live in a shithole. We like treating your country like a tidy town, where we're all in it. And fine, it's okay to want to achieve things and do well and get an extra few quid for yourself, but it's not the same greedy, greasy fucking attitude that's here. And in a lot of places, that filthy fucking me, mine. I put money into my children's education, not because I want them to be well educated, but because I want them to have a leg up on your children. That's the whole fucking thing.
And all delivered
that's where
with
the money
hypocrisy
goes.
Of religion and care
and we use religion to hide behind it.
Oh, we're such a loving, caring
But that's
nation.
why people get pissed off at you when you criticise religion. It's not because they're deeply religious. It's because the religion thing is just their way of getting into that capitalist, greedy shit. That's where the money's gone. The money's there, we're just not fucking sharing it around.
So we will be doing a show in July, around my birthday, from Denmark. We've done Norway, we've done Iceland, and
Denmark, I think,
we're doing Denmark in the first week of July. So
it came second in the
happiness.
In the happiness.
So you haven't got to happiness yet, folks.
Ireland came 13th this year.
So this is world. You wouldn't think it from the
it's
sort
the
of
International Day of Happiness.
The aggravated nature of our podcast today, because we're just goddamn pissed off about everything.
Always give it out.
But today is World Happiness Day. It's the 10th year of its operation, and it was invented or suggested by someone in the UN, I think, about 2012, and it's
hilarious that we have our day of mourning on the Happiness Day.
And it's the National Day of Mourning here, so. What they taketh with one hand, they giveth away with the other. And there's a little chart, if you go on Wikipedia, there's a link at the end of the podcast about stuff. One of the things was to embrace hedonism, was one of the suggestions about happiness. Yeah. But there is this thing about happiness I want to talk about, which is, and you were reading the same article in the Irish Times yesterday where they asked all these people about what made them happy.
Yeah.
And when were they most happy. And it's always a kind of, in many of these answers, it was a kind of a slightly whimsical, small point but poignant.
Yeah, I found it kind of waffly. It was
I know, but I was thinking about it myself. If you actually say, when were you most happy? I prefer the idea of a condition.
So I've a weird view on this because I spent most of my life deeply depressed.
Deeply unhappy.
Well, yeah. Like, I was very, very unhappy. I was at home. I was not working, not seeing anyone. Like, when you fall off the face of the earth and you're literally in one room and left to rot.
It's like COVID, basically.
Yeah, except worse because it's your fault and everyone hates you. But, like, I've had a real fucking delve into, like, I've had the suicide attempts, so it's a weird thing for me to look at the concept of happiness. I separate happiness from joy. So I think sometimes when we ask this question of people, what exactly are we asking? Are we asking what makes you happy, as in contented, happy in yourself? Or are we asking what brings you joy? Because I would see those as two different things. I've only been happy in the past few years, and even moments of joy probably only really started coming around the past couple of years. So, like, I genuinely was miserable. I'm not fucking Susie Sunshine, but happiness was completely elusive to me. I didn't ever have any happiness up until like well into adulthood. So it's kind of a weird thing to kind of think about the concept of happiness. So a lot of the interviews was, oh, well, I like feeling the water on my skin. I go for a swim and all that.
Don't be nasty to other people.
Oh, no, not being nasty, but I kind of, to be honest with you, it was like they were asked a question, and I suppose I better, how are you supposed to answer this?
You would have answered it very differently to them because you felt you've never had happiness. Okay, so that's your answer, but it doesn't mean other people can't have happiness.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if they've asked 20 odd people, we've only given you space for a couple of, it's one of those questions that you go, well, how am I supposed to answer that question? I don't think it was a particularly deep answer. I don't think they were getting into it. I think it was just fluff filler for the paper.
Okay. But even if you read books on happiness or people in books, there is this thing where a lot of it is, I went away on an amazing holiday. I left work. I did something different. I moved jobs. I changed. I did, there's all these things where I found the dream job of my life and realized I was working in this horrible thing. But a lot of it was the society bit, that where the drudgery of society is broken and a ray of sunshine comes in some shape or form.
Yeah.
And it's so memorable. And people said, and I'd always have those memories of my father or my mother or whatever it was, and that time we all met up in the garden after COVID, and it was great, whatever. But it's whimsical, it's small, but it's a chink of light that brightens up an otherwise dull, and maybe in some cases like you, very black environment.
I think joy is a like, so I know a lot of them kind of talked about going for a swim and all that. It's not my bag, but if you do go for a swim and you get into it, particularly if you're, because a lot of people are a bit older, if you're in your 50s or 60s, and one person had mentioned that they'd taken back up sailing but didn't give a shite, they looked crap and they're never going to win any prizes. And I thought that was interesting, because we sometimes live so much in our heads and we kind of forget that we're animals and we take ourselves so seriously in society. So, so if you haven't been swimming and then you haven't done it in years and then suddenly you get into it, you kind of, even if people just did during COVID, you can kind of understand that it's quite a profound experience and most people don't even take baths, they just shower. Yeah, but it's quite a profound thing to actually inhabit your body. And particularly if you do so at an age where you realise, I'm never going to be good at this, I'm never going to be, and then there's permission to play. And I think that's something that I found when I did find happiness, was permission to play is something like to give yourself. But it's really important because it's like that's taken off us. And after a certain, like, people don't do art after a certain age unless they're good at it, or even if they're not amazing, but they have a knack for it. And it's not even that you don't show other people. It's very rare that somebody will play music or do art in their house just to pass a bit of time because they feel foolish doing it unless they're quite good. To me, that's quite important with happiness. Discovering things that are really simple, whether it be swimming, like things like music, art, anything that brings you kind of a visceral moment of joy, and discovering that and giving yourself permission to do it, not just despite being bad at it, but to enjoy it, because it's not about performance, it's not about being good at it, and you're not measuring it up afterwards. It's just the sheer pleasure of doing it. That's quite an important one for happiness.
Yeah, I think puerility, as you said, this whole, everyone's so serious. And we're living in an outrage culture. I mean, people say, oh yeah, well, your podcast is very outraged. Yeah, we are outraged, but we're outraged equally with the people who are causing the most outrage on the left at the moment. So it's about human beings taking themselves too seriously, not being able to take a joke. And that's always been a problem. And, you can say, even Doug Stanhope says, back in the day, there's always something at the time that if you say it, it's wrong.
Yeah.
You can't make jokes about dead babies. You can't make jokes about AIDS. You can't make jokes about 9/11. So, eventually time passes and you can make jokes about them as long as they're funny. But, there was a time when we'd be living in an environment in the UK where everyone was making jokes about black people.
Yeah.
And so you have to be careful. But, and then who draws the line? It's certainly not Sean Boyle and the Don who decide what the line of comedy is,
Yeah, I do think on the happiness thing, a lot of people would say, if you were allowed to include big events in their lives, they'll talk about like if somebody has died or whatever. It's just I'm so happy I have these memories. And sometimes I wonder if they are, like, did you actually enjoy it at the time? Because we have a tendency to view the world and life as this ongoing film or this ongoing quest the whole time. So it's like we don't tend to enjoy moments while we're in them, but we look back at them and it's really important to have photographs, and it's like we've banked the wealth of these experiences. And I don't think people are telling lies. I don't think they're really stopping to think, did you actually experience joy at that time? Is it just in theory? Because I don't know how many times that I have a great idea that I'm going to bring the kids to such and such place, and I kind of go, well, I'm glad I did it, but no, I didn't fucking enjoy it, to be quite honest with you. And it's not the kids' fault. Yeah, sometimes it's kind of like, I'm glad I did it, but like, and I look back at photographs on Facebook and go, oh, what happy memories, but it was fucking shite. It was shite. Yeah. You know, and there are those moments, and I know even especially when the kids are small and you're kind of going, everyone's like, oh, don't wish the time away. And I used to feel like the worst mother in the world because everyone else is remembering every single tooth that came up and when it came up and filing away every memory, and I was just kind of having a heart, especially when they're babies. I'm going, this is fucking awful. I'm miserable. And people say, oh, don't wish. Why am I like not terrified that the children are going to get older and I'm missing it? And I kind of then realised after a certain point, listen, you're not enjoying it. It's the baby years. It's not for you. Doesn't mean you don't love your kid, but you might just have to endure it. I'd say she'd probably be more crack when she's 3. Yeah. And it was true, but it was fucking awful at the time. And I remember, like, it's one of the things that I would say anytime I hear of a mother that's having a bit of a tough time, I always go, listen, come here. Ignore your ma, ignore your auntie saying, don't wish the time away. Wish it away. It's shit. It'll get better. You're not enjoying this time. We often kind of have this concept of happiness, but we don't actually experience it. And I think the giving yourself permission to play thing, allowing yourself to be childlike, is really important, because the child just kind of gets taken away by 7 or 8. We're trying to hide it, it's being pulled away from us. And I think childlike wonder, and that involves things like, do we always have to be productive? No. Who said we always have to be productive? What does it mean to live? There's like the purpose of being productive so as not to fuck your life up, so that you may have comfort, so that you may have money. So you can be without worry. So there's a reason why sometimes we have to work and make sensible choices in order to save ourselves misery. But we live with this kind of, a lot of us have this thing where even if we're just saying, I should really have done something today, go, well, why? Is there something that you needed to do? No. Are we wasting time or are we spending time? It's okay to spend time just being good to yourself. Did you enjoy it? Did you sit and watch shite on Netflix and have your good pajamas on that make you happy and, you know, the candle that you like? Did you enjoy it? Well, then you didn't fucking waste the time.
So, I think we've talked about this, about the COVID thing and how brittle everyone seems to be when they have to stay home, right? And that brittleness transmogrifies itself into protest and violence on the streets or mental breakdowns or whatever. But my happiness, I mean, a lot of people think first of all, I think people think I'm a lot angry than I actually really am. Although I do get angry and I'm not afraid to vent my anger, especially on the show. But it's all done with there's also a character I build. I mean, I write about this. I mean, I'm not like the character I write about in marketing magazines. It's like a fictitious version of me. And I also am very happy. I mean, I'm a guy deep down who, you know, if you cut me open, is quite happy, has been very lucky and felt that I've been very privileged to get this sort of life I've had. And being able to see the world and see how people can have happiness in abject poverty, or can have happiness, smiling faces of kids in India and places like this, where you just go, you know, you're very lucky that you've been able to not have to live outside, for example, or live by the side of a train track, or live in a tent. And so I keep telling myself that when I do get unhappy. And I think the biggest contributor to my happiness is not having had children. And I made a decision very early, and I see so many of my friends who will never admit it because they can't. It's an appalling thing to say. And it is an appalling thing to say. So you actually can't really say that you're unhappy because of your children. But children cause huge amounts of stress, unhappiness. They cause you to keep working right up till the last day. They're often not grateful for what you've done for them, or in some cases you fall out irreparably.
Yeah.
And the actual ability at me at 50-something to be able to just slightly kick back and not be nose to the grind is very beautiful. It's very nice. Yeah,
and also, I mean, it brings it back to, you know, you'd want to be a real earth mother to get real pleasure out of kids. And I preface that with, mine are actually at a really fun age now. So I'm really enjoying that. And like, when I enjoy them, it's like often
you're
when
like
I
a best mate to them. Like,
yeah, but I'm an arky bitch.
So young.
Yeah, but I'm a lot stricter in different ways than most of their friends' mothers are, as in terms of how they speak to me. Now, I let them swear within the house, but I point out, listen, the simple fact is you can't swear at school, you get in trouble, and I will let you hang. I will go, I can't believe that. I don't know where he heard that. Clearly in his father's house. It's not in this house.
Fuck.
You wouldn't, what your fuck, but every time they do, I say, well, what the fuck did I tell you about your fucking language? And he thinks it's hilarious and he'll piss himself laughing. So I'm kind of, but if they spoke disrespectfully to me, like, I noticed the other mothers just let the kids speak to them like shit and throw the school bags at their feet and that. And I'm very old school in terms of, excuse me. So I expect respect, but like they're not, they are people. And I get great crack out of them when I see their personalities coming out and I see the bit of fun. And to be honest, neither of them, it's very rare that I get attitude off either of them. You know, they'll do things wrong, but they don't, they're not rude to me, they're not disrespectful, they're just kids and they get giddy.
But you also treat them differently. You also give them, you treat them with respect and you expect it back, which is
yeah, but then sometimes I don't, and I'll be really upset with myself, like I mean, it was just the other day, and I'll apologise and I'll go, listen, and she's like, what's wrong? And I was like, I'm just really upset with myself because I was a fucking bitch to you this morning. I was a thundering bitch. She's like, oh, it's okay, no, you're right. I was like, no, I was. I'm like, yeah, you drove me mad, and it really fucking annoys me that you keep doing this thing, but like, that was fucking outrageous. That was, I was a thundering bitch, and I've been so upset about it all day.
The issue with happiness, though, is that it's in the eye of the beholder or the place, you know.
Yeah.
So, in other words, within, you know, a compound of refugees in Lesbos in Greece, there's happiness in there.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's happiness in prisons, and there's happiness in schools, and there's happiness in hospitals, and there's happiness on deathbeds. So there's, you know, it's a very ethereal thing to
even just with the kids thing though. But I don't think of, you kind of think of your happiest moments in life. I don't think of when my eldest was handed to me or when her brother was handed to me. And it's not that I don't think of those things, but I think of when he said something really fucking funny at that moment and we both kind of looked and said, Jesus, that was fucking sure, you know, or when something clicks for them that didn't before and you see an aspect of their personality, it's really, really joyous. And maybe we'd been bitching at each other and sniping, I'd been giving out all morning, but they come in that afternoon and something nice has happened, or like I see that they enjoyed the lunch that I made because I made a real effort to make it nice. Like I get real pleasure out of when we have a bit of crack together, but not the days that we arrange. Not that they're not nice, but if we arrange something special, they don't spark joy as such. They're things that you ought to do, and yeah, it was nice, and we went to such and such a restaurant. But the real kind of moments where I get for a few seconds and I kind of go, I can't believe I spent so long from birth just being absolutely miserable, and I really didn't ever think I'd know what happiness is. But it's when you kind of go, fuck, we'll do the homework later. It's like, you know, but because we're having a really good conversation and they say something funny, that's where the joy comes in.
So my view on what happiness is, having lived 54 years and travelled the world in search of it,
only to come home and find you here.
It's always at your door, isn't it?
Well, I am the goddess of
the
joy.
Nose in front of your face, staring at you straight in the face. Now, my view on happiness is, it's action, and this is why I brought up that newspaper article, that when people are put on the spot to give yourself a number, you know, 10 being very happy and 2 being very unhappy, 0 being really unhappy, is, I think happiness is best described as an absence of shit, an absence of drama, an absence of death, an absence of upset, an absence of tears, crying, you know, pressures of meeting bills and stuff like that. The less rocky the sea, the more you'll paddle along in it happily enough. And then occasionally, if you have nice things that you can remember that are joyful, that's what your happiness is.
I think that's what I meant.
We think it's more, we have to be achieving something, or the joy is happiness, and maybe the joy isn't happiness. That's
what I meant earlier on when I said I think there's two different questions, like the difference between am I happy and having joy. I think joy is that emotion, it's an experience, and I think joy is something that I kind of only really started to discover in the past couple of years. So when it happens, I kind of, and I'm never a little bit anything. Like, I remember we were in Singapore and I get a bit overwhelmed after a while. So it's just taking a little bit of time for myself, listen to a bit of music. And it was like one of my favourite music pieces. And then it was raining really heavily and where we were was beautiful. And I'm just bawling my eyes out. What's wrong? I was like, I'm just happy. Yeah. But like, it was like moments of joy, something really pretty. For me, definitely music. If the music just gets me. And if I used to come over here on a Thursday afternoon and there's a certain spot I sat in because you'd be finishing up a job and the sun used to come in and I'd do my little meditation shit there and I'd have that orchestral music going and the sun would come in and I'd go, fuck me, that's just brilliant. Like, that's just, you know, those,
but also you have to be able to give yourself time to notice that.
Yeah.
You know, because I was in the other room working and whatever I was doing, you know, I missed it. But, you know, that you have to notice it's there, go to it, climb the mountain if there's a lovely dawn at the top of the mountain, you know.
Yeah, but I think sometimes you also have to, there is an element of, the permission to play comes in, because often we don't give ourselves space to notice, nor do we give ourselves over completely to actually experiencing the joy. We're so busy saying, isn't that lovely now? We're very happy, but we're like intellectualizing it so much that we're not willing to yield ourselves to actually experiencing the joy, which is also why people are having very bad sex or not having enough of it, because like you actually have to be willing to yield yourself over to a moment of joy. The childlike wonder thing and the not worrying about what anyone else fucking thinks if you look like, or if you cry because something's happy, without worrying about that. But more importantly, it's the self. It's like when you're completely alone, sometimes we don't know how to mess with ourselves. Like I talk to myself a lot more out loud now than I used to. Like the mind can't be taken over. Like I'll mess with myself every time you pass a mirror in the house. And I remember I used to get, if I was really, really unwell, I used to have to cover the mirrors because I'd get to the point where my face would start moving in the mirror, like the bone structure. I'd be so convinced there's something evil going on, and that would be a sign I'm not well at all, and I'd be like, fuck, I can't pass mirrors for the next few days. But now I have a tendency to, whenever I go to the loo, there's a mirror there, I'll always have a quick chat with myself before I leave the room, and there'll usually be some joke, or it'll be the same way like every couple has their in jokes, and we've got the odd time we'll say a line, we'll say a one-liner, but I say it to myself all the time. Like I'll often chat away to myself, or I'll find an old message, or I'll find something like a Facebook memories, and I go, Jesus, Darren, you're gas. And like, it actually does bring a lot of happiness to not take myself seriously, to be friends with myself, to be goofy and mess. And I think it makes life a lot nicer. It makes shitty days, well, at least you can have a little bit of camaraderie with yourself. But it also means that when opportunities for actual joyous moments come up, you're not taking yourself so fucking seriously, because you're just in the habit of chatting away to yourself. And, you know, I think that's really important, is learning to actually yield to be able to have joyous moments.
And then the other thing I would add to it is don't be a cunt. And I think that we even brought it up earlier today about, you know, even back home in Ireland, my friends are always trying to get one up on each other. They don't tend to celebrate their successes. They want to be richer. They want to be ahead. They want to be the best guy in the class. They want to be, and they're prepared to lie. And they live lies. And you say to them, you're living a lie. And they go, no, I'm not. I'm a very honest, integrity, upright guy. No, everything's a lie. You lie about everything. You lie about tiny little things. Was the food nice? It was lovely. Will we go out even though you don't want to? You lie. Your whole life is a whole lie. And you don't even know, because you're lying so much. And it's not just one guy or girl. It's sort of society. Oh,
that, like, it resonates with me a lot, actually, because there's somebody that was in my life that I remember thinking, and not in a bitter, nasty way, going, he's going to end up a very, very unhappy person because he's doing grand now, but just like life comes and kicks you in the tits. Whoever you are, at some point, maybe you have a midlife crisis, someone dies, you know, a divorce, something. You'll be in your 40s, but at some point, life is going to trip him up. And when it does, he's probably going to be really lucky, and he'll have lots of people that are willing to help him and offer him kindness. But the twisted awful thing is he's not going to be able to recognise kindness. He's not going to be able to trust it, because he's never been decent himself. He spent his entire life trying to fuck people over. There was no pleasure in something unless he kind of pulled a fast one. One of those personalities. And I went, oh God, even if you are lucky enough to be surrounded by kindness, you're not going to be able to yield to it. You're not going to be able to accept it, because you've never had a pure heart and been kind to others. So I think that really is important. I think, like, in terms of, you don't want to be that person that can never accept kindness or trust it when you've always had an agenda yourself. So that's trying to avoid unhappiness rather than happiness. But when happiness does come, you want to be able to accept it. Like, I know when I was younger, something that I found really difficult was I had been treated really badly. And then I got to a certain age where I kind of developed the Dawn personality, and I realised I had this capacity that I could walk into any room and make myself a centre of it, and it seemed to go quite well. And everyone would be a lick arse, and suddenly, from being treated like shit constantly, it was, yes, Darren, no, Darren, 3 bags full, Darren, isn't she so funny? And I found that really disheartening because I went, oh my God, great, now I'm not the dog to be kicked anymore and I can be popular when I want to be. But I realised that none of these people are really my friends. And if they met me a year ago when I desperately needed kindness and compassion, they would have kicked me when I was down. So I found that really difficult, and it took me about, it was funny, I was actually talking to my daughter about this the other day. I said, I think it took me a solid 10 years after coming to that realisation and finding that really sad, that life had gotten much better for me, but it was just so hollow and icky and empty to know it only got better because I was able to fake it and people felt they had to be nice to me. But the people who desperately need kindness are the ones that are going to be kicked. That really broke me, and it took me about 10 years to actually come through that and be able to cope with that. I can remember what it was like to be kicked. And I can remember how hollow and empty it felt not to be kicked anymore, but to know it was only because I was getting away with it rather than because people gave a shit. I've grieved for that, and I actually needed to grieve over that. And now I kind of go, okay, I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to make sure I look out for the people who need a bit of kindness and, a bit of crack. I'm not going to be that fake person. I'm not going to be a hypocrite, because that's what it was with people, is hypocrisy. I'm going to have integrity even if people don't fucking like it. And frequently I make friends and then they fall away after a few months because essentially they're very disappointed that it turns out I'm not a bitch. And I'm like, no, I'll mess on Facebook and shit and I'll rant but no, I'm not a bully. I don't want to be a bitch. A lot of female friends find that deeply disappointing. And that hurt me. That hurt me that the world is so yucky. But I kind of went, okay, but I can't possibly be the only good person in the world. And I'm sure there's many people who are much better than me. And I know that a lot of the world are arseholes or are just not good enough and carry on with hypocrisy and are unkind. But if I'm thinking this way, and I make my mistakes, obviously, but if I'm thinking this way of really trying not to be an arsehole, try and look after people, including people who maybe aren't always great crack, but maybe you need to be the bit of sunshine there. Maybe they're not able to make conversation. The fact that I'm just going about my day thinking that way means that other people are too.
Yeah.
And that makes me happy.
Well, that sounds almost religious, doesn't it, Don? But, this is the problem. I think people, I'm finding, especially even the age gap between us, there's a lot of my friends coming out late 50s, mid 50s, just going, what the fuck was that all about? Disappointed, sad, unhappy, lonely, realising, I think, with maturity comes a little bit of wisdom that you've been faking it for so long. I mean, I look back on some of my early days in advertising and I kind of go, I always had this kind of angry young man kind of in me, right, and didn't like anyone getting badly treated in offices that I worked in or not being paid on time and all that kind of shit, just a kind of capitalist wank where somebody's able to sleep like a baby because they go in and they act the bollocks with other people in their job. And I pick on people who
cuntishness.
General cuntishness. And a lot of people don't feel they've stood up for it or that they've lived it or they've been it. And when you can come out one of the things I always say is, and I'm working on maybe some sort of treatise on this, is, know when to stop working, because work is, unless you're really lucky, like we talked earlier, and you're doing a job where you really, love it. Yeah. It's just bollocks. Work is a means to an end to getting out of work to do whatever. Raise children, build a house, go on a holiday. But the amount of time we spent working, thinking it's important, and my career is important, and the amount of money I get in the pecking order of a family or of my friends is important, and I want to be a CEO or a president or a vice president or a senior vice president. All of that is absolute horseshit, nonsense. And usually, as I said, you're trying to sell razor blades, and maybe this will bring it back full circle, in Russia. And someone in Russia goes, I don't want any blacks in the ads, and you have to deal with that. And it's how you deal with that. Yeah, but also do you resign over that, which I didn't do? Should I have resigned over that? Should I have resigned because the leader, and I can guarantee you one thing, they may not be overtly saying it in memos, but P&G and probably Unilever and all the big companies who are now pulling out of Russia, or the ones that aren't, they believe in advertising that you don't put black people in ads in Russia. And there's an interesting debate you can have there. For example, would we put Japanese people in ads in Ireland, okay, to sell to the Irish? Okay, so that's just a neutral sort of thing. It's not necessary. But these people are racist towards black people. And I don't know the actual answer to that other than how grubby and in need of a shower I felt after listening to that call.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is Global Happiness Day. We wish you all every happiness. Unless there's anything more you wanted to add, did you?
No, I don't think so.
I thought we got a little we got a little bit more positive towards the end.
I know, we always do that. We go too far. We're either ranting and going,
well, no, the last one was the opposite. We were
awful.
nice at the beginning and bad at the end. So you never know what you're going to get on the Pint with Shawnee B. We are going to leave you with a follow-up to the piece that we played by Doug Stanhope. This was Doug Stanhope's apology for his piece about India. I apologise to my Indian brethren if any of you were really offended by that. I hope you took it in the spirit which it was intended.
And I hope it brings some of you joy if you go, oh, Doug Stanhope, I must look up his stuff, and then you discover him, and I'm so jealous because you've got all of his stuff fresh.
Yeah.
You've it all to see, and if it brings you joy, you're welcome. That's your gift today.
He's an angry little prick, Doug Stanhope, but he kind of comes down on the right side of things more often than not, and he's funny, and we need more funny in the world, and funny makes happy. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
On the night of Saturday, May 25th, I made wildly inappropriate stereotypes regarding Indian men that I thought were said in confidence. I hadn't noticed the cameras, the microphone, and the giant shrieking audience. Yet still, this does not excuse me promoting such a myopic denigration of a country wonderfully rich in heritage and humanity. I hope this apology will usher in a new era of understanding and open a dialogue that allows all of us to grow. And rape jokes are never funny. You cannot make jokes about rape because at least the rape culture, the rape jokes are never funny. That's the thing. If you're a new comic in here and you're dealing with all